Hello and welcome back, my friends, to our second lesson in this unit on American military expansion and military might. This is the Spanish-American War, a splendid little war, as it will be known. Let's get started at the beginning. So, until the 1820s, Spain had controlled most of the Western Hemisphere. They were a major power in the world throughout the 1500s, 1600s, less so in the 1700s and the 1800s. It's all falling apart. But by 1898, its colonies were kind of gone. They'd all said, hey, Spain, you're weak. We're going to be independent. But there were still three remaining. Cuba and Puerto Rico, which are in the Caribbean, very close to the United States, and the Philippines. These three remaining colonies, Spain wasn't going to let them go. They wanted to be a colonial power. They wanted to have that stature. So they fought and fought hard to make sure that those nations would never be independent. And they violently suppressed them. This guy right here, General Valeriano Weyler, it gets a lovely little nickname, the Butcher, for how ruthlessly he puts down any revolt in any of these territories. Now, here in America, we love to portray ourselves as the good guys and other people as the bad guys, and news stories really seized this. News stories about the Spanish brutality, especially in Cuba, became really popular in the United States. We love to read about how nasty the Spanish were being to the Cubans. And competing newspapers realized that the eviler they made Spain look, the more evil Spain looked, the more newspapers they would sell. People love to read about the bad guys doing bad things. So they often exaggerated Spanish cruelty. They made the Spanish look even worse just so they could sell newspapers. It was really good for business. We call this yellow journalism. This sort of yellow journalism, it's not dealing with the truth. You're yellowing the truth. You're dirtying the truth. It's not so much the truth. We're not doing journalism so much as taking real-life events and kind of fictionalizing it. Anyway, this yellow journalism had Americans so angry at these evil Spanish doing this on our doorstep. We got to go in. We got to do something to stop them. McKinley didn't agree. President McKinley thought that this was probably a bad idea, but he did send the U.S. Navy to Cuba as a little warning for the Spanish. Like, hey, we're here. Watch what you're doing. Don't go overboard. And then, boom! A battleship, the USS Maine, this guy right here. Oh, look at all those people flying up in the air. I hope they landed safely. Yeah, they didn't. This USS Maine explodes near Havana, Cuba. 260 American sailors are killed. Now, the explosion was an accident. We know this to be true now. We've been able to look at the Maine with submarines and see exactly how the damage. It definitely blew up from the inside. And it was a faulty design in this particular ship. They put the coal room right next to the engine room. So you have your fuel and your engine really close to each other. And there was a small fire, and then boom! But that's not the good story. The good story is the Spanish, the dastardly Spanish. They attacked us. The Spanish have declared war on us. Remember the Maine. Remember the Maine. They attacked us first. Let's go get them. And so America declares war on Spain. Pressured by the American people, remember the Maine, McKinley signed a resolution which supported Cuban independence. Cuba, you can be independent now. Spain's going to leave you alone. Spain, leave them alone. It's time for you to leave. But Spain says, no, we're not going to do that. Cuba's ours. So Spain refused to withdraw, and America declares war on Spain in April of 1898. The Spanish-American War, has begun. War against Spain. The focus of the war, the main idea of the war, was supposed to be Cuban independence. But an important outcome of the war came from the Philippines, not from Cuba. See, the United States Navy realized, like, hey, war has been declared on Spain. we have this whole Pacific fleet, a bunch of ships over in the Pacific Ocean. Let's see what we can do with them. See, there's this independence movement in the Philippines too. Let's go beat up on the Spanish a little bit. So we show up in the Philippines. Commodore George Dewey shows up in Manila Bay and attacks the Spanish fleet. There's some discrepancy here. Did the Spanish even know that war had been declared? We're not 100% on that one, but the Spanish were definitely caught off guard. And immediately the Filipinos realize what's happening. They jump in on the attack, and the Spanish are just absolutely crushed. This one battle is all it takes. And right here, boom! And the Spanish fleet is knocked out. There is no naval support for Spain. Nobody's coming anytime soon because they're now in a big war with the United States and the Caribbean. And the U.S. is in control of the former Spanish colony in Philippines. Wait a minute. Filipinos, you guys thought this was an independence movement? No. Oh, that's cute. No. You used to be a Spanish colony, and now you're an American colony. Yeah, that's how that works. All right, back to the Caribbean. Volunteers to join the U.S. effort against Spain were rushing to the military, swelling the U.S. military ranks. Everybody wanted to be a part of this thing, including this guy right here, Theodore Roosevelt. He now has his face on a mountain on Mount Rushmore. Yeah, he's going to be important. Theodore Roosevelt resigns from the Navy Department. This was a political job, he wasn't a military man. He resigned from a political job to go sign up and fight. And he formed the first U.S. volunteer cavalry, which they called the Rough Riders. It's a whole bunch of guys with horses who like the idea of running around and killing people. And they go to Cuba and they do that. They fought and won the Battle of San Juan Hill, the decisive battle in Cuba. This bunch of guys that got to get on their horses and ride over to Cuba and kill people. And they won a battle. Way to go, Teddy Roosevelt. The war lasted a grand total of 4 months. 4 months. Remember, Spain was one of the major world powers just a little while ago. And here's the U.S., just starting to feel our oats, seeing if we can stand up against a major power. Now, Spain was a second-tier power at this point. They weren't major anymore. But we go in and we whoop them, and whoop them quick. Just 4 months, an overwhelming U.S. victory. No significant losses in this war. Secretary of State John Hay then called it a splendid little war. It was a way for the United States to enter this world stage. We're no longer a regional or North American power. We put the smackdown on Spain so hard that the rest of the world took notice. And they said, hey, those Americans, they're kind of the real deal. When the war was over, Spain was forced to give up control over Cuba, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Aww. We get Guam, and we get Puerto Rico, and we get the Philippines. We don't take Cuba. McKinley denied independence to the Philippines. Filipinos, you're ours now. The U.S. only allowed Cuban independence when Cuba accepted very specific terms here, the Platt Amendment to the Cuban Declaration of Independence. This allowed U.S. intervention on the island. So basically, Cuba, you can be independent except if we don't like what you're doing. If we don't like what you're doing, then you don't get to be so independent. We're going to come over and we're going to interfere. And if you don't like that, you can have the Spanish back. Puerto Rico and Guam, they just straight up became U.S. territories. You're ours now. Thank you, Puerto Rico. Thank you, Guam. Oh, and side note, they're still ours today. Yeah, we still have colonies. Well, colonies isn't the right word, but U.S. territories. All right, so looking at all these things that the U.S. is doing. Hey, Spanish, colonies are bad. Bad, Spanish, bad. Hey, we're going to have colonies now. A group of Americans started to look at that and say, that's not right. We can't do that bad thing that other people are doing that we called a bad thing and then call it a good thing because we're doing it. That doesn't make sense. And they formed the Anti-Imperialist League, a group of Americans that stood up and said, hey, U.S., We need to be supporting self-government. You know, the whole Declaration of Independence thing that we wrote, 1776. Yeah, that should apply to other people too. Everybody should have self-government. But the League was really unsuccessful because everybody likes a winner. And Americans, we're the winners. We're going out and we're winning this stuff. This is cool. Let's go Team US. And that is our tale of the Spanish-American War. Our splendid little war. I hope you learned something, maybe even enjoyed this lesson just a little bit. I know I did. Farewell.